everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be giving you 10 classic books that you absolutely have to read in 2021. So over the last couple of years I've really gotten into classic literature. It's something I'd not really explored before that point, but I have found so many great books that I've really enjoyed reading, and I just wanted to share a few of them with you today. I've tried to pick out 10 books that I think are relatively easily accessible to everyone, so the language isn't too difficult in any of these and they're not particularly long either, so that hopefully this is something that is accessible to everyone, either if you're just looking to start getting into classic literature, or you're just looking for a few random book recommendations, or also if you're maybe looking to apply to uni to study something related to English, then maybe this could give you a couple of ideas of books you could maybe include in your personal statement. So before I get into the video, I also just want to say this isn't in any order. I was going to try and put it in some kind of order, but to be honest, it's so hard to decide which one I love the most, so these are just completely randomized, and I hope that you enjoy my recommendations. Okay, so my first recommendation is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and this is genuinely one of my favourite books. I have read it so many times I can't even tell you, and I just think this is really accessible to everyone. It's really easy to read, really easy to get into, and I would definitely recommend it to everyone. So the main themes of this book is focusing around race and class in 1930s America. It's set in the Deep South, where this was a major problem at the time, and it's told through the eyes of two children called Jem and Scout, and their father is a lawyer called Atticus, and he is defending the case of a black man who is accused of raping a white girl within the village that they live in, and that is kind of the main storyline of the book. And it just explores these themes of race and class really well. It's quite satirical in parts. There are a couple of other plot lines that run alongside this main theme which also make it more engaging, but I think the themes of this book are really important. One thing I do just want to briefly touch on while I'm talking about this book is I am aware it has come under some criticism recently for portraying white saviorism within the book and the storyline, and that is definitely something that you should bear in mind whilst you're reading this, because that is really important. My second recommendation is Animal Farm by George Orwell. I absolutely love this book. I think the concept of this is incredibly clever, and the fact that it's written in literally like 100 words I think is really amazing. It's a really powerful story, and you can literally just sit and read it in like one afternoon, which is really good if you're just looking for a really quick read. So it's very well known that this book is meant to reflect the themes of Stalinist Russia, which was obviously communist, and is trying to explore that in a completely different context, which I think is really clever. The main plot of this story is basically where the animals on the farm overthrow the human farmer and drive him out of the farm, and they then set out to create this equal society where all animals are equal and they all earn the same amount of rewards and do the same amount of work. But this very quickly falls apart, and this kind of equal playing field that they set out to have very quickly turns into quite a nasty hierarchy, and a lot of things start going wrong. And it basically just explores how communism in practicality is really just not possible and not a good idea, and I just think this was a really powerful way of explaining that concept. My third recommendation is a book that I actually think is really underrated, and that is Time's Arrow by Martin Amis. I'm not really sure why, but I never really hear this book talked about that frequently, and I'm always really confused by that, because I think the concept of this is really original. I've not come across a book like this before or since reading it, and that's kind of why I wanted to include it in my little series today. So the concept of this book is basically following the life of a German Holocaust doctor whose life is being told in reverse. So it starts from when he's really old, and he gets progressively younger throughout the book, and I just think this is a really original concept. I've not come across this before, and it's just a really powerful way of telling the story. It can get a bit confusing at times. You have to kind of learn to read the dialogue backwards and make sense of that, but once you really get that, I think it's a really good book. Again, it's quite short, it's quite easy to read, and I just think this is a really powerful and interesting different kind of way of telling a story. On the contrary, my fourth recommendation is a book that is really widely talked about, and that is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This book I loved so much. Actually, when I read it the second time, I liked it the first time, but I wasn't like obsessed with it. But after like a few rereads, I was like, yes, this is amazing. And I think that's because there is a lot of symbolism in here. It's really powerful in its symbolism, and I think to properly get the most out of that and to really fully appreciate it, it's something that you've got to read at least twice. And I think that's why I enjoyed it more the second time round, because the first time you're so focused on the plot, and the second time I just really appreciated the literary genius that is this book. So this novel is told through the eyes of the protagonist Nick Carraway, who moves into a little cottage which neighbours a massive mansion on Long Island, and the owner of the mansion turns out to be Great Gatsby, who's a very mysterious kind of man. You don't really know much about him at the start, but he strikes up quite a unlikely friendship with Nick, and Nick then finds out about Gatsby's love for a married woman called Daisy, and this turns out to be a bit of a tragedy. In the end, it's a bit of a tragic love story, but it's really encapturing, and I think it also captures the essence of the jazz age and the American dream really, really well, and kind of is a bit of a critique of the American dream as well. That's a bit more subtle, I think, but I think it just captures that age of America really, really well. My fifth recommendation is also quite a unique concept. This is Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I think this is a really powerful book. It's very different to any other classics, so it's definitely something to read if you're looking for something a bit different to what you'd normally go for. And it's basically where a plane crashes onto a desert island and a group of schoolboys are the only survivors, and originally they think they're going to be rescued pretty much straight away, and it soon becomes apparent that's not really going to happen, and it's about how they come to survive on this island, and essentially their sense of order just gradually dissipates over time and they end up just becoming savages, and it's about how they survive together or not so together. And it also explores a theme of a beast. They're scared of this mighty powerful beast that comes out at night, and that kind of haunts them in the nighttime, and it's just really, really powerful. I don't want to give away too much, but I definitely recommend this. I think it's a really interesting read. It's very, very different from a lot of other books. Okay, my sixth recommendation is a tragic love story, which is Withering Heights by Emily Bronte. I love this book. It is so, so powerful. I think the imagery in this book is incredible. The descriptions, just the way that she writes is really artistic, and I am in love with it. I think just the literary power of this book is second to none. I really, really love it. But the actual story of the book is basically focusing around Catherine and Heathcliff, who are basically a forbidden love story. So Heathcliff is a foundling. You don't really know anything about his past, and he works for the people of the house, which Catherine is a part of. So it's kind of focusing on that issue of class and not really supposed to be like segregating that divide, and it's kind of how they overcome that, and it's set on the Yorkshire moors, which is quite a mysterious kind of powerful imagery environment, which I think is what makes this book so great. And again, I don't want to give too much away because it is kind of tragic, and there's a lot of imagery and concepts that I think is really important to get your head around when you read the book rather than having it explained to you. But I recommend this to everyone. I don't think this is something that's maybe necessarily the best thing to read as your first classic book, because I do think the language is slightly less accessible, but I think if you are getting into classics and you've maybe read a few and are looking for something new, this is the perfect book to move on to. My seventh recommendation is again quite a unique one. That is Life of Pi by Jan Martel. I love this book. I feel like I say that about every single one in this list, but like, this is so good. It's basically where a boy and his family are moving from Asia across the Atlantic to America with their whole zoo. They own a zoo, and they move on this massive cargo ship with all the animals, and the ship unfortunately ends up sinking. This is basically it right at the start of the book, and the boy ends up stuck in a boat with a tiger and a few other animals, but these animals basically end up being eaten, and it's just the boy and the tiger left, and the story kind of tells about their adventure across the Atlantic and what happens to them. And it sounds like a weird concept, but it is so, so powerful. The way it's told, the description in this book is amazing, and I think the way that it kind of explores the complexity of animal nature is really, really important. It's just a really amazing read, and the way that it kind of tells the story through the thoughts of the boy and how he perceives everything that's happening around him, I think is really, really powerful. It's not maybe so much a typical classic, but it is a classic in its own right, I think, and it is something that's really easy to get into, so I would definitely give this a try. My eighth recommendation I think is a really important one. This is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I love this book. Again, it's really short, it's quite easy to read, and this is also set in America, I think around the 1950s maybe, and when this came out, this was quite controversial at the time because of some of the language it used, and also the themes that it explored. So this talked quite a bit about mental health, which at the time was just not widely spoken about at all. It was quite a taboo topic. So this was really important and really powerful when it was published. And it basically follows the life of a 16-year-old boy called Holden Caulfield, and it actually only happens over about 2 days, and he's expelled from his prep school in Pennsylvania, I think it is, and he goes off to New York City for a couple days, and he's basically trying to find a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, and a bit of a truth really in the real world. He's trying to get away from what he describes as phoniness, which he believes just completely surrounds him, and as he carries on he kind of gets progressively more emotionally unstable, and it just follows his kind of experience over those couple days and just talks about his thoughts and feelings about everything in a really, really powerful way. And it's kind of got quite a big theme of teenage rebellion within it, which is why it's become quite a big classic among adolescents and teenagers. And I just think this is a really powerful book. It's very controversial for its time, as I mentioned, and I think that makes it a really, really interesting read. My 9th recommendation is actually a dystopia, and this is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I love this book. The concept of this is incredible. So it's basically about a society where books are forbidden. So if anyone is found with books in their house, these firemen come around and they burn all those books. Books are not allowed to exist. They're told that books are the source of all unhappiness within their society, and they basically are just forced to watch soap operas all day. They have news delivered to them through little like AirPod-like devices basically in their ears, and it's just all about media and conformity and the way that books are meant to be perceived as this really bad thing. And it kind of explores how people rebel against that and actually realise that they're unhappy even though they're told that they're meant to be happy. Because there are no books, they realise that actually that's not the source of their unhappiness. Okay, I know I said at the start that I found a really hard time picking favourites, but I genuinely do think I've saved the best till last. So number 10 is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I am in love with this book. I genuinely think at the moment it is my favourite book of all time. It is so powerful. I could not put this down when I read it, and I just love it so much. Also, if you've seen the film on Netflix, the new one, and you didn't really like it and you haven't read the book, don't let that put you off, because I was really mad about the film. The book is so much better. They completely messed up the film. But anyway, so this book is basically about a young woman protagonist who you never actually learn the name of, who meets Maxime de Winter in the south of France, who is a widower, and he very unexpectedly proposes to her and suggests that she moves to England with him to his mansion at Manderley. She agrees and she moves back, but when she gets there it's very different to what she expects, and she realises that the place is pretty much haunted with the memory of his first wife Rebecca, whose spirit is basically kept alive by the housekeeper Mrs. Danvers, who really hates that this new woman has arrived and effectively taken Rebecca's place. And she just really struggles to find her identity and to figure out a sense of belonging and who she is while she's surrounded by all this mystery of Rebecca. And just the way that this story is told is so powerful. It's extremely atmospheric. It is the most atmospheric book I've ever read in my entire life, and for that reason alone I think that's why I loved it so much. But if you want a recommendation that you won't be able to put down, this is absolutely the book to go for. Okay, so that brings me to the end of my recommendations today. I really hope that this has been helpful, and I hope that you found at least one book that you think you might want to start reading. I have loved all of these books, so I really hope that you will love them as much as I have if you do decide to read any of them. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a massive thumbs up and let me know in the comments your favourite classic books, or if you're planning on reading any of the ones that I've suggested. And alternatively, if there's any recommendations that you have that I haven't mentioned, then please drop them in the comments, as I'd love to see what they are, and I'm sure that other people would be really interested in them as well. And finally, if you want to see more content about academia and uni applications and sixth form and that kind of thing, then don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you next time with a brand new video. Bye!